Hey, greetings everyone. It's GleeCon, and I'm back. Nice to be here again. It's been a few days hiatus, as I explained on the past couple episodes. I took a weekend away, and it was a good time. I enjoyed it, and I am now happy to be back, cranking out some more content. On the last episode, we did pretty much finish Ashen Vale. I really think we're completely done with that zone. We just have to do Black Fathom Deeps, and then maybe some running around, turning some stuff in after that. So Black Fathom Deeps will be on the next one that we'll put out tomorrow. From the Horde, we've already done it as an alliance. It's going to be, it should be cool. Then on the episode before that, we've been reading through World of Warcraft, the official magazine, hard to find. And we started off our third issue, which is kind of like the middle of this short run series. And it really just talked about some things that are going to be changing. What's the state of the Alliance as we come into making Cataclysm kick off? So stay a while and listen. As we jump into this episode, we're going to basically spend our entire episode with an interview with Chris Metzen, which is pretty cool for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, he is, as it says kind of here, the mind of Blizzard's creative godfather in this article entitled The Story So Far. Two, as far as IRL, what's going on right now, Chris Metzen's back to kind of take the helm and pen the new direction of World of Warcraft. I also, this weekend, just dropped, probably in like in conjunction with BlizzCon, the next expansion, which will be coming out in about a year, called A War Within, or The War Within. Video cinematic, awesome. Blizzard definitely has always been bringing top flight A+ material, just a really cool. Their graphics are out of control. I'm excited for the story. We'll see where this underground kind of realm takes us, but it's actually an idea that I've been kicking around and thinking it's natural for some time. Is just, hey, peel back the underside of Azeroth and then make a whole other world down there, and you can really make it look like whatever. It doesn't have to be dark the way we've been doing the Dragonflight zone underground. But I think it's cool. I like the idea that it's going to be the beginning of a trilogy, 20th anniversary, to open up, you know, the next 6 years of gameplay. I think that'll be pretty fun. Or whatever, however they do it. They might do, as I've seen some people suggest in my own comments, they might do it where we do more frequent updates, smaller, more frequent expansions. It could go either way. I do have to get on it and catch up with the stuff in Dragonflight. I haven't read, I think the newest little mini thing started and I never finished the other stuff. So I'm a little behind, and I'll probably start playing. I've just been really focusing on Diablo. So Blizzard's getting my time. I'm just doing some other stuff. I've really been having a good time with my current build. Okay, so it says, I like stories about the fall and redemption of individuals and cultures. I like stories about evils of the ancient world coming back to haunt the present. All three of these franchises are rooted in the same DNA. Okay. You don't interview Chris Metzen so much as toss out an idea and get out of his way. Even at the ungodly hour of 9 a.m., when he's admittedly not at his sharpest, Chris is never at a loss for words as long as the topic is interesting. Chris's title at Blizzard is Vice President of Creative Development, but that seems a bit stuffy for a guy whose office is crammed with comic book and Blizzard memorabilia. Every flat surface serves as a platform for an action figure, from Captain America to Gangris Riverpaw. Put the stress on creative development. Just about every narrative thread woven into the Warcraft, StarCraft, and Diablo universes passes through Chris's hands. If you want to know the hows and whys behind what moves these worlds, Chris is who you want to talk to. Given the opportunity to tee up a few topics for a Metzen mind meld, we found out what gets Chris going, what he's learning about the movies, how the players influence the Warcraft story, and whether he believes that Blizzard Entertainment is making art. I would absolutely say so. Look, this is actually some Chris Metzen artwork right there. Getting things done. What's your day like? Do you write a lot? Attend a bunch of meetings? If you weren't here talking to us right now, what would you be doing? It says, when I'm interacting and when we're jamming on ideas, I'm euphoric. Here's another one of Metzen art there. 9 a.m. Laughs. For about 2 years, our 9 a.m.s were on StarCraft 2 story development and cinematic development, but it was just beating everybody up trying to get in and be effective, be electric at 9 a.m. It's difficult to engage the engines that early in the morning. Are you kidding me? I know. I have to be at work at 7 a.m. So tell me about it. I have a lot of meetings. I went through a period of many years where I had 8 or 9 meetings a day, where once mostly it was a craftsman type role. I would sit in my office, I would write documents, write scripts, and then walk around and just jam with people in various departments about broad creative direction. It used to be a lot more direct and specific creative pockets. Over the years, as we added more games and the company has grown, my role as creative director really became more about upfront meetings, conceptual meetings, jamming, being a little less hands-on at the front line level. I work on all of our products to different degrees. Mostly these days, it's just a lot of meetings. Yeah, I hear you, man. I'm backing off a little bit on StarCraft 2. I wrote quite a bit of that one with 2 other primary writers. I did a lot of work on the cinematics and a good deal of work on story mode, along with Andy Chambers and a newer brother named Brian Kindrigan. I'm trying to pull back a little bit on the next expansion for StarCraft 2, Heart of the Swarm, but I'm still working with Brian pretty hardcore on the general story arc. My big interests these days are where it's going, how it's getting there, what are the major character arcs, making sure the major themes we're committed to are evidenced, but the ins and outs of all the mission stuff, I could probably step away from that these days. It's a good thing. I haven't worked anywhere else, so I presume that we're a very strange culture. You've got guys like Executive VP of Game Design Rob Pardo, myself, and Executive Art Director Nick Carpenter, and we pretty much jumpstart the conceptual process through cinematic design and story development, but we're not the actual leads on each team. Each team has its own lead designer, lead writer, and art director, but we float and provide a lot of overarching creative and design direction for these games. As things have gotten bigger over time, it demands that we use our time more effectively because we can become serious bottlenecks to production. Makes sense. Charging the batteries. What gets your creative juices flowing? What are your influences and how did you get into storytelling? I'm a big people person, so when I'm interacting and when we're jamming on ideas, I'm euphoric. It's the craziest thing. I didn't realize this about myself for a very long time. Where I'm at my best and most creative is when I'm actually in discussion with people. It's not necessarily sitting at a desk clicking away at a typewriter. I do enjoy that, just jamming away at ideas, but what's became clear to me is that it's far more about that social component. Sitting around a table with your buddies, just plugging away at an idea, shaping it, molding it, riffing on movies we've seen or other stories we've enjoyed. I think that's where I'm at my most effective. I'm a massive comic book geek. I've got to go every week. I've got to have it. I've been having a blast with comics lately. I've been going to the comic store every week since I was 12. I get super depressed when I don't get out to get my books, even when they suck. I binge game throughout the year, but I read constantly, mostly comics. I guess I like the pictures and I like the drama. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, always have been, so that was always totally and experientially affecting to me. I named my boy Lucas in testament to my fandom. I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons growing up. I particularly love the idea of sitting around the table with your buddies and imagining far-flung worlds and working with the thinnest rule sets to effectively entertain yourself for years and years on nothing more than the engine of your own imagination. That's amazing. To contrast with games today that set up all the rules for you, and then you interact with them in a very particular way. Boy, did I love D&D as a kid, just the sheer open-ended imagination of it all. Wielding weapons, that's a cool Frostmourne. Although Frostmourne looms large in Chris's world, the Ashbringer probably had a bigger effect on him. I love sitting around the table with buddies and entertaining yourself. Yeah, that's the engine of your imagination, what we just talked about. Here's another neat picture. I constantly wanted to be in a space of far-flung imagination. As a little kid, pretty early on, I wanted to make stuff up. I would sit in the back of class with my math exams, drawing maps, character designs, weapon designs. I constantly wanted to be in a space of far-flung imagination, and D&D was the crazy vehicle for that. The part of me that wanted to build worlds. In the 5th grade, I had a buddy move in from out of town who got me into D&D. I'd never seen anything like it before. I think it was the first Dragonlance adventure, and it was just absolutely transforming. I was reborn after that point. I don't even know if I looked at comics the same or the things I had already been into after peering into the lens of role-playing. It's just a more imaginative side. It's not necessarily something in your hands. It lives in the minds of the people around you. I just wanted to stay in that space. Art-wise, I love all the painters that were working for TSR back in the 80s. Keith Parkinson, Larry Elmore, Clyde Caldwell, all those guys who painted the vast D&D worlds. I just fell into those art books as a kid. I've worn out probably 5 separate copies of The Art of Dragonlance, pages pulled apart, because I would pore over them every day and just study lines and study costuming, gimmicks, lighting, and dynamic poses. I just couldn't get enough of that stuff. I used to draw quite a bit as a kid. When I first got here at Blizzard, my title was artist. I did a lot of concept drawing, so Art's always been key to me. I'm particularly a fan of Walt Simonson, who did the Mighty Thor for Marvel back in the day. Oh man, this guy drew the hell out of that thing. We actually got to work together a number of years ago on the Warcraft comic. Still amazes me. Jim Lee, who did X-Men for a number of years, I just loved his lines, loved his character designs. A guy named Alex Ross, a painter, he's kind of like this Norman Rockwell Americana kind of illustrator, but he handles superheroes in a way that really roots them in a kind of hyper-reality and his story instincts. I love what he does with Superman and Batman. He takes these characters and makes them mythic. He really brings out what's great about them in the first place and puts it in the stratosphere. Anything that comes from Alex Ross, I just kind of drool over. I got to spend a little Warcraft money on some Ross originals, so I thank Warcraft for that every day. I'm sure he spends his little bit of Warcraft money on some interesting stuff. So I got into Dungeons and Dragons. It sounds like I'm maybe a little bit younger than him. Dragonlance was really cool, but it was probably maybe Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition was right around when I got into it. And I went back and got older Dragonlance stuff later on from garage sales and used bookstores and stuff. But there was a monster manual, and same thing though. Growing up, I have my specific artists from Dungeons and Dragons world where it just blew me away. My particular favorite is a guy named Tony DiTerlizzi, or DiTerlizzi. I'm not sure how you exactly say it. To this day, just his art style is so distinctive. Anytime I see it, and I love to draw too. Not particularly awesome, but I drew a lot as a kid, and I just really love his style. So if you know, familiar with the older D&D art, he's probably still making some stuff. I've seen a couple children's books by him and a couple other things he's illustrated. Tony DiTerlizzi, really good, just amazing. Working the big screen. The World of Warcraft movie project was announced in 2006. A few years after that, a director was hired, Spider-Man Sam Raimi. The movie is still in the preliminary stages with lots of work to be done. How do you like working with Sam? How do you face the challenge of boiling the entire Warcraft universe down to 2 hours? Actually, I kind of think that the Thrall in the new cinematic, it kind of harkens to that visual interpretation of Thrall from that movie. The primary difference between working on the movie and working on the games or the licensed fiction is that we have a very high degree of direct control over the latter products. I'd say 90% of the novels we outline exhaustively before it ever gets to the writer. On the game front, we have total control to tell those stories, to shape those worlds, and it takes a while. For the movie, the main point of distinction is that our controls are more indirect. It's all about the directors, the producers, the writers, the talent you bring on, as it should be. That's the way that industry works. So to us, it's been a bit mystifying, but we have the best possible partners who share our values and have a view into this franchise that's as close to our view as possible, so that they understand what's cool about it and what's not cool about it. That movie was okay. Not the biggest fan, but I didn't hate it the way some people hated it. This is the Warcraft comic. Blood Elf Rogue. Walt Simonson, one of Chris's favorite comic creators, worked on the World of Warcraft comic. Above are some concept sketches for a cover by Walt. After choosing the image that would grace the cover, the next steps are pencils and colorings, finally resulting in the finished cover, kind of like we have this. Here's some actual Metzen art. New Gettysburg. This is some StarCraft and Warcraft art. It says artistic roots. Chris says he hasn't drawn in anger for quite a while, but he studied and practiced fantasy illustration intently while growing up, and even started his Blizzard career as an artist. Yeah. People seem to be very emotional about games, and that's because they're feeling the artistry. Okay. To some great degree, you're putting a lot of trust in the partners and the team you put together. We feel pretty strongly that Raimi is the right guy. He's had great success in translating a beloved and venerable franchise into big screen gold. For Spider-Man, he made changes and adjustments where he needed to fit all this into something that would read in this day and age and also be compelling in that 2-hour window. He really pulled it off and pleased not only fandom, but everyone else who didn't necessarily know all that much about Spider-Man. I think a movie, not a live-action movie, I think a full-on CGI movie, well, that would be time-intensive. I think that is probably the way to go. And I really think if they just tried to tell the story from the beginning, you could tell a lot of cool stories with that. Maybe even as a show, like a Netflix show or something like that, or a streaming show instead of a movie. Sam's awesome. We talk about a lot of different kinds of stories and the essential problem with a franchise that's currently populated by 10 races. Where do you put that camera? If I play a troll, that's my anchor, my root in this universe. If it's the lens through which I see a lot of this. We go back and forth on that kind of stuff. We've had some really good discussion about what will sing to a mass audience but remain true to the series and remain familiar to anyone who's experienced it. I love getting that view into other media types. It's been cool to talk to people and hear their experience, get a sense of how their craft works, get a better sense of what types of story paradigms traditionally work for a mass audience and what kind of things don't. I came to the table with all sorts of screwy ideas. I can take risks in novels and games in terms of story conventions that are more acceptable in a game's experience. But when you sit people down for 2 hours in a movie theater, there are things that will turn them on and things that will turn them off. So hearing that type of experience, I'm like, oh, wow, I would have gone this way and it would have just toppled. It's a science, script development. They've been doing it for 100 years, and you can really gauge what actions will work and what won't, what's been tried and failed, what's succeeded. It's been very educational in terms of shaping my expectations about the kind of story we can do. With Warcraft, we know we have a fairly sizable audience anyway, and it's plausible that audience will show up if it's good and bring their buddies, but we want to make sure it's not riding on the popularity of the franchise as much as that it just kicks ass and that it has tremendous heart, that it's a feature that you want to go back and see again and again purely on its own merit. The nature of art. There has been a lot of discussion in the gaming world lately, inspired by an opinion put forth by a well-known movie critic about whether games can be art. What is your opinion on that? Are games art? I just don't understand how anyone on earth can say that games aren't art. I don't understand it at all. The only way I can get my head around it is in asking the simple question, how do you define art? Splotches of paint and human fluids on a canvas sells for $6 million in New York or whatever in the art world. That's art, right? Van Gogh is art. Is there anything more subjective in the world ultimately? What is art? What's the point? It's to craft things, points of expression that are meant to inform or communicate what we are to other people. Pretty simple. Past the point of simplicity, it can get pretty subjective. I look at games and I don't see that it's any different. Is novelized fiction art? Is War and Peace art? Is Grapes of Wrath art? Yeah, they totally are. Is the Beatles' White Album art? Is the Joshua Tree art? Yeah, they are people expressing themselves to other people, to excise their own feelings and experiences and bring that to the world to incite discussions, to incite emotions. There are many reasons to engage in or create art. Given all that, games are no different. The only difference is that, like Hollywood, you've got sometimes upwards of hundreds of people all collaboratively shaping products that have the same essential DNA as anything else. We've got original music that a highly artistic musician wrote and composed. We've got dozens of artists, painters, and illustrators all throwing in to create the vision of this thing, whatever it is. You've got the new expressions of coding and design. You can say, oh, those are just mechanical processes. But they're not. What's the simple process of coding with ones and zeros, but building things that do not exist, like constructing the invisible and making rule sets to define the physics of the invisible? Name me a more creative process. We're not talking paintbrushes and number 2 pencils or anything. These guys deal with technology the way Mozart dealt with piano keys. You just can't tell me it's not art. Where the theme and the story come forward and are emotionally impactful. I live for those moments. There's another Metzen photo. And Brad, if you want to experience one of Chris's favorite storylines, head to Icecrown, where Tyrion Fordring will start a tale of valor. And then the impossible happens. All these crazy sciences that could not be further apart collapse together in the eye of the storm, producing something so distilled and focused that for years upon end, people are engaged and emotionally compelled by it. They're thrilled by the gameplay, in love with the characters, whatever it is. I would say that games are art, obviously not just ours in particular, but I've seen a lot of people who seem to be very emotional about games, and that's because they're feeling the artistry of what they experience. It's not just chasing clever apps-a-freaking-lutely. Some of the most touching, memorable moments of my life has come from video games. Not just WoW, although a little bit from that, sure. Tons of games. One of my favorite video games as a work of art is the Earthbound. That game is just amazing. Makes you feel things. It's just resonates on so many levels. Or look at, I don't think this is even a debate anymore. I think that ship has long sailed. There are too many games that are just pure art. If there was no deeper artistic component, no one would make anything other than Tetris. And I'm not slamming Tetris, it's genius. But if games were just this mechanical experience, fast, immediate, tactile gameplay, they wouldn't go much further beyond puzzles. We'd be left in an ocean of Scrabble. tell me that it's not art at BlizzCon. Walk around, talk to these players, and then tell me there's no emotional connectivity to these worlds and ideas. You can't tell me that isn't art. Stories that stick. The Warcraft setting is huge. Add the StarCraft and Diablo universes, and you've got a wide-ranging, deep well of stories. Which ones have stuck with you the most? I'll say this. They are all, to one degree or another, I'll say it. They have the same DNA. They're almost all the same story when it comes right down to it. I'm like a 1 to 3 trick pony, and that's about all I'm good for. The trick is the collaborative process. I like stories about the fall and redemption of individuals and cultures. I like stories about evils of the ancient world coming back to haunt the present. All 3 of these franchises are rooted in the same DNA. I think my favorite Warcraft story was a tiny questline, the whole Bridenbrad questline in Wrath of the Lich King, which we did as kind of an homage to our buddy's brother Bradley, who passed away of cancer. There's this fallen knight who's contracted this inescapable contagion, and all the great powers in the world to try to rescue him. Ultimately, there's the knowledge that there are things that you can't just walk away from. But the nobility of going through that journey, your spirit rising from the conditions of your life, really played out in a very emotional way, for me at least, in that storyline. There are moments like that in Warcraft where you find an unexpected layer of emotion and satisfaction, something that's supposed to be mechanical, right? I love those moments. I love when I hear back about those moments. You go to BlizzCon and read the message boards and the players say, oh man, that made me feel this or that. That's where the pepper is knowing that it was more than a mechanical process, that it was more than I'm grinding rep to get my next epic headdress. There are moments where the theme and the storyline come forward and are emotionally impactful. I live for those moments. One of the joys of StarCraft recently has been that there's the big grinding galactic conflict and an ancient menace coming forward to the present to swallow creation, but ultimately it's just about this boy and this girl. Just this unrequited love story between these very mixed up, lonely people. After something like World of Warcraft that's so macro and so global, it was a pure joy to get back into a space where it was just a simple story about people, for all of its shenanigans and highfalutin concepts. Ultimately, we are just artists trying to express something innate in ourselves that maybe doesn't come out in everyday conversation. Maybe things that we're not even consciously aware of, but still absolutely shine through our work. I'm fascinated by stuff like that. I'm sure that there's something happening between Raynor and Kerrigan that reflects something innate to my experience. I don't have my head around it all. It's a hell of a thing. I may be a little biased. I just can't wait for this game to get out to the world. I can't wait for people to meet these characters again and see what they thought of the journey. And even if no one cared, if no one did single player and it was an absolute flop and burned down in the gutter, the biggest laughingstock ever, it wouldn't matter. I'm just proud of how it's gone off. Knowing that I got to be part of that process, it's definitely one of those high watermarks in my career, even if no one liked it at all. I'm just so proud of it. The human effect. Are there special challenges to writing a story that gamers will be playing a part in? How does the community reaction to different stories affect you? Do you remember any strong player reaction to a storyline? What made it stand out? The whole Ashbringer line, I had nothing to do with it, which is one of the reasons why it was so bitchin'. It was really lead world designer Alex Afrasiabi's brainchild, love child. I had been hearing about this Ashbringer thing. Ashbringer, what is that? It's a cool name. What is that? I went on the message boards and the players were losing their minds in speculation about what the sword was. Were they going to find it in the game? If you were holding it for any given amount of time, it would start whispering things to you and people were trying to transcribe what it was saying. I was fascinated by how quickly and how passionately the community wrapped around this thread. There are mountains of content in this game that I have nothing remotely to do with, and I dig it when those elements come out. There's that real-time dynamic in play that can be at once totally maddening and totally thrilling. When Wintervale rolls around, you may be tasked with saving a familiar-sounding NPC, Metzen the reindeer. There's Ashbringer right there, which actually kind of looks like the sword that I just saw in the cinematic, that old Anduin had. When you get massive community feedback and you feel this emotional response you didn't expect, as a developer you say, I guess there was something in that. Was there something there that we did not see? In that way, I think the community hugely affected the way we're looking at the content. So the community is huge in terms of how we tell our stories. I had no idea. With Warcraft 3, it was write it, put it in a box, hope they dig it. StarCraft 2, you write it, put it in a box, and you hope they dig it. But World of Warcraft is a completely different monster because you know immediately what they think, even when the game isn't even out yet. I know what they think. Imagine being a painter in real time, getting your nice controlled gallery show, direct lighting and the champagne and the photographers, only you're doing it in real time with torches and pitchforks. I'm kidding, obviously. I love our community, but you can feel like that at times. There is that real-time dynamic in play that can be at once totally maddening and totally thrilling. For Lich King, for instance, Bolvar was not one of the major characters, right? He's one of the few marquee human characters we have, but it's not like there were whole books written about Bolvar, but we kill him off in such a dramatic way at Wrathgate that suddenly the message boards explode. Bolvar! There's speculation and excitement and discussion about who this guy was, what's going to happen to him, right? It was just a step in our storyline, but there was so much passion about this character and what might happen to him. We made him the Lich King. We didn't necessarily know that the day we wrote the Wrathgate cinematic. We didn't necessarily know it the day we finished its production. But it was one of those moments where the World of Warcraft community was so geeked up that it geeked us up. Hell yeah, we're going to jump back into that, even though it wasn't necessarily our plan. I'd love to tell you at the end of each of these games, it blows on a finger like he's just fired a gun. Whew. Nailed that down to the floorboards, but inspiration comes from anywhere. I think the community massively affected the way we were looking at the content. Yeah, there's Bolvar again. The new Lich King. The twist at the end of the Wrath of the Lich King wasn't necessarily predetermined. Player reaction to Bolvar's death at the Wrathgate influenced the creative team. That's summarizing what we just did. Or read. Here's another example. The inverse, the character of Garrosh. We're making moves because we want to push this franchise forward for a time and do some really dramatic, earth-shaking stuff. The idea that we would make Garrosh into the next war chief is crazy, right? If you're a Horde player, if you're buying into this fiction at all, you probably love Thrall. He's Clark Kent mixed with Spartacus and splashed with green. So Thrall is going to step aside and Garrosh becomes the new war chief, and we made him into a particular jerk because that's who he is, and that's what's going on in the world. It's all building toward a plan. Years from now, this will all still be playing out, and players of the game are getting a sense, there's speculation, Blizzard, you can't possibly be making this guy war chief. We hate this guy. I'm a good orc, I'm noble, I'm not going to follow this guy. They're incensed. That's true, that's a good, and you'd have to be tickled as a creator. To some degree, it's art. You're telling a story, you're building a world, you're building this interactive experience at a fictional level, and we're also trying to run a company and keep the lights on and keep all these people gainfully employed and do right with the business. And suddenly I'm sitting on this powder keg. The right thing for the story is to shake things up a bit. But this is a dark chapter. It's meant to be thematically challenging, and suddenly you've got hundreds of thousands of players who are pissed. I mean, really pissed at this storyline that they expect is going to happen. This level of emotionality. While it's right for the story, is it bad for business to turn all these players off? That's crazy. That's crazy thinking. You can't write stories in fear. But they don't see all the steps and they don't see where it's all going. It's just this step right here that's going to piss a lot of people off. And suddenly there's this whole new psychology in play. Is this right to do? Are we just manipulating all these players' emotions? Things that never occurred to us before are suddenly in play, and that's fascinating. We're expressing ourselves and building out this narrative, but at what level is it almost conceptual irresponsibility? It's a crazy line. The trick is that we're going to do it. We're going to make it as good as we can make it. We'll stick to our guns. Hopefully people will see on the other side of the event, holy cow, that the emotion of it made the experience that much more fulfilling. I 100% agree. You gotta ride with it. I didn't love Garrosh then. I don't love a couple things that they do here and there and now. But I'm never one of those people that are going to burn down the message boards over it. I'm along for the ride, you know? And the fact that we have Metzen back as part of a steward of it, I kind of, I'm happy about that. So we next have an advice column called putting your something to the test, putting yourself to the test by beta testing Cataclysm. I'm actually strongly considering buying the Ultimate Edition of this new WoW so that I can get in on beta. I want to get in from day one on this expansion. So I got to get where getting's good. I think what I'm going to do is once I max out the season, if I can max it out fast enough, and I think I'm doing pretty good for Diablo, then I'm going to just dive into WoW and get that going as far as I can. Push through all the newer content. I'm not going to get into any mythics or anything else. Maybe I'll do the just looking for raids to get through, but just get to the end of it so that when the new expansion comes out, I'm really going to go all in on this one. I'm going to go full meta. And I think I want to do the beta too. So yeah. All right, cool. We got another episode in the pipe, 5x5. I'm not going to start this next episode yet because we're flushing right up. It's also actually Little GleeCon's birthday today, so he's been having a good day, partying all day, and we'll get back out to that. But he was in there building some Legos, so I was like, I'll take this opportunity while he's not gaming to come in here and play on my own. So happy birthday out there, Kenan, or your buddies, if you end up checking out this episode. And other than that, yeah, thanks everyone. See you on the next episode of Lore Warcraft.